Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to do part 2 of my review of my Beatles books. And in this section I'm going to cover the solo years. So just before I get on to my top 10, I want to mention a few which didn't quite make it, and before I even do that, maybe one which I missed from the Beatles section. The Making of the Beatles White Album here by Dave Quantick. I love this kind of book where it goes into immense detail on all of the tracks and the surrounding atmosphere and producers and everything. Great book. So a few kind of near misses and maybe recent books. This is quite a recent one, which was a good read, but it kind of scratched the surface in terms of going into detail. So to date, we haven't seen a definitive biography of any of the Beatles post the split. So I hope Mark Lewison gets around to doing that after he's finished the Beatles ones. Seriously, we might have to wait about 10 years for that, but anyway, 15 years. This is another good one, John Lennon Letters, collecting all of John's letters to his family over the years. Some very interesting stuff in here. Even includes shopping lists, asking his assistant Fred Seaman to go and buy grape nuts and the latest Wings album, Back to the Egg. So loads of good stuff. This is a real fan's book, excellent. This is not bad. It's got some interviews, Paul Gambaccini interviews, 1975, around the time of Venus and Mars is the main one in here. Pretty decent. This is a nice format of a book. Has quotes from the Beatles themselves, split into various sections such as religion and music and the breakup and stuff. Excellent, excellent book. This is sponsored by Paul himself, the official history of Wings, which went along with the CD compilation which came out a few years ago. Very nice. I think the best thing about this book is the pictures, which are excellent, and obviously there's a Speed of Sound birthday cake there. So the pictures are excellent, 10 out of 10 for that. But the text is thin, and although Mark Lewison does a reasonable job going through the albums at the end, again we only scratch the surface. These are two Wings books I had from early on. Both of them came out around the time of Wings Over America, and I really enjoyed this one, particularly this Tony Jasper book, and I like the way at the end he goes through the albums. There's a section behind the albums which is excellent, but not nearly enough detail, I have to say. So let's get on to my top 10 solo Beatles books. So number 10 is from George. This is I Me Mine, and this is good in terms of he talks about each song and he reproduces the lyrics, the handwritten lyrics. He doesn't actually talk about the background of. He doesn't talk about the Beatles years very much at all, and I know John was unhappy that he didn't mention him too much, but it's a very interesting look into his songs of the solo years. And the reason this isn't higher is because when it first came out, he charged the fans 150 quid or something, and just printed a limited edition, leather bound. So most fans were denied access to that book, and it wasn't until 1982, 2 years later, when it came out at an affordable price. So that's a bit of a niggle with that one. Number 9 is an excellent book by John Weiner about John Lennon seen from a political perspective. So just going through his 70s career, particular emphasis on the Sometime New York City section. But, covers the feminist father bit at the end, and very well written. Probably my favourite Lennon sort of, if you call it a biography, probably my favourite. This one is number 8, Blackbird, Jeffrey Gilliano. Now, this is a very entertaining read, but you do have to take it with a pinch of salt, because some of the sources he's got here are from slightly embittered parties, perhaps, such as Denny Lane's wife, Jojo. But I think I know the stories well enough to know what to believe and what not to believe. And there's a lot of good stuff in here, and very sympathetically written, and you can tell he's a fan. And a fair amount of detail in terms of the music and the background of each of the albums. And as a foreword by Denny Lane, actually, who also contributes to this book. And it is not too negative, actually, in his contributions. Number 7, Bob Woofenden book I got in the early 80s, Beatles Apart. Very good to see. I think at the time this was about the first book that came out, which just concentrated on talking about the solo years and the albums, going into a fair amount of detail. Nice pictures and stuff. And very well written. And even if I don't agree with everything that Bob Woofenden says, it was nice, for example, to see him praise the George Harrison album, for example, which not a lot of critics have done, and also the Beaucoups of Blues. Bob Woofenden sticks his neck out and says it's one of the best Beatles solo albums, so that was nice to see. This one is number 6 from Ken Sharp. This is a book detailing the double fantasy sessions of John and Yoko in amazing detail, and it's got contributions from Jack Douglas, Earl Slick, Hugh McCracken, Tony Levine, George Small, Andy Newmark. They're all of the musicians are talking about it, and that's what makes this a brilliant book. I really recommend this. It's only covering one short period of John's life, which turned out to be near the end, as we know, but very, very well written, and the inside information he gets here is as good as you can get, because he's talking to the band and he's talking to Jack Douglas, and I don't think he actually talks to Yoko, I'm not sure. He's got some quotes from Yoko in the book, so maybe he does also spend time with her, but top book. Number 5, this book from Peter Doggett, You Never Give Me Your Money. Very well written. Peter Doggett is probably second only to Mark Lewison in terms of being an expert on the Beatles, I'd say. Used to write for the Beatles Monthly all those years ago. And this is an extremely interesting, well-written book, very perceptive. The only slight negative I would have about it is it's concentrating on the squabbles, both business squabbles, musical squabbles, whatever. And there's a bit of an emphasis on that side of the story. I mean, you can tell from the title maybe. But that's a minor grumble. I really enjoyed reading this book. Nice one. Number 4, I'm going to put these two together because they're kind of overlapping, from Keith Badman. And these are the books which kind of like almost like a compliment to the recording sessions books that Lewison did in the Beatles years, because it's got every single date throughout the 70s and 80s, and what songs were recorded, quotes from all of the Beatles, 75, 72. It's got George talking about his reaction to the first Paul McCartney solo album. It's got Paul saying how nice the tune and the guitar solo was on George's Give Me Love single. There's loads of nuggets in here. Really recommend this. And this is kind of a similar book, but going into I can't actually remember the difference between the two books, so get them both. I think they're both essential. That's number 4, and then number 3 is the I think I showed you on the Beatles video, the Beatles version. This is the solo years, Working Class Heroes, and you can tell how much I love this book because it's completely come apart. But the nice thing about this book is it's got the pictures of the single sleeves at the time to promote the to promote the singles, and that gives it a nice period feel. And it's got chart positions, musician credits, B-sides. Just a great little book, and I really need to get this one rebound. That's number 3. Number 2 is a very recent book by Andrew Grant Jackson, Still the Greatest. And this book is great because this book is doing exactly what I used to do for years and years, and still do, is it puts together the best tracks from the solo years and makes hypothetical Beatles albums. So he's not saying that that's what should have happened, but he's going through what he thinks are the essential songs from the solo years, and is pointing out their merits, but he's doing it in a format where almost like imagining them as Beatles albums. And this picture is very interesting. This was on the back of Wings' Greatest with just Paul, Linda and Denny, but here you have the full picture with Joe and Jimmy, which I'd never seen before, which is very interesting. And I'm trying to date that picture, and I still haven't managed to completely date it. I would guess 75, 76. Might have even been slightly later, I don't know, because it turned up on Wings' Greatest in October 78. So that's number 2, and then number 1. A bit of a cheat, as with my Beatles books reviews. This solo one is going to end with a series of interviews which I'm counting in my list as kind of audio books, and there's 4 items to show here. This is the Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder, where it's got interviews from John from 1975, with Paul, Linda, Lawrence Juba, Denny Lane from 1979 Christmas, and just before Wings flew off on their ill-fated trip to Japan, and an interview from Ringo from 1981, and just they're all brilliant to watch, particularly the John one and the Paul. The Ringo one is okay, but he's a little bit miserable in that interview. But the John and Paul one are brilliant, and then these Lennon interviews are just brilliant. These 2 books cover the 1970 interview, Lennon Remembers, and the 1980 Playboy interview. So they bookend the last decade of what turned out to be the last decade of John's life very interestingly, because this one is very bitter, just post the split, and this one is a lot more philosophical, and he's a lot warmer towards his former colleagues in this book, and more understanding in general. And then this book, this audio CD, and there is a book of this which I can't find, is the Andy Peebles interview from December the 6th, 1980, 2 days before John passed, and this is a BBC interview, and it's just brilliant as well. I think Lennon is the most captivating Beatle in terms of interview material, always has been, and I really never tire of listening to that and any of those, or reading. And this one you can get on the Rolling Stone podcast. You could listen to the audio of this one, so I recommend you check that out. I hope it's you didn't get an impression that this was too Lennon focused. I think there have probably been more better books written about Lennon than Paul in general, and George and Ringo. Well, there's only one written about Ringo, and that's not even worth talking about. Now, there are loads of books I didn't show you here, written about all 4, and the reason I didn't show you was because there's nothing to write home about, pun not intended. So, thank you for watching. See you next time.